Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Practitioners Podcast, where we discuss business from the perspective of an HR professional. On today's episode, I wanted to have a brief discussion and share some considerations for those of you who support a global population. Now, as HR practitioners, there'll be a time in your career where either your company is going to expand and acquire another company within another region, another country, or you might change jobs and support a global organization with employees all around the world. Regardless of your path to getting to that space, there's a different mindset that you need to have when you're supporting a global workforce. And I'm going to share a few considerations that you should have when you are in that situation. So let's just get right into it. So, the first consideration you should have is with regard to currency. So, depending on where your main headquarters are for the company that you work for, if it's a small operation, more than likely your company pays employees and does business with one type of currency. But if you're working for a global organization and with employees all around the world, then you're gonna have to be familiar with the different currencies that the employees of that workforce get paid in. So most companies generally focus primarily on U.S. dollars, and they do all of their comp planning activities with U.S. dollars. But when it comes to remitting that payment to employees, whether it's for a merit increase or a bonus, they generally do it in the local currency for that respective country. So you need to be very mindful and vigilant on the different currencies that are out there, because some of them tend to be very volatile. For example, Venezuela has been having a lot of currency issues within the past couple of years. So you definitely would need to factor that in when thinking about compensation planning for countries with volatile currencies, because by the time that you're actually doing the planning and then you're gonna be remitting that payment or that bonus to those employees, it could be so volatile that the purchasing power could be dramatically different, and it won't have the same effect that you intended for retaining and rewarding uh, those employees in that particular country. So currency is definitely a strong consideration that you should have when you're thinking about supporting a global workforce. The second consideration for HR practitioners supporting a global workforce is language. Um, Language is, the basics for general communication. So, especially with HR practitioners, we're constantly communicating things to the workforce, whether it's related to current events, whether it's open enrollment benefits, or even general communications related to emergencies and disaster awareness and different situations. So, but language is something that you would definitely need to be vigilant and mindful of. Um, Especially for things such as job descriptions and job postings. You want to make sure that you are able to translate certain documents such as job descriptions and other policies in employee handbooks and things of that nature, to make sure that all of your employees are on the same page and that you can communicate with them in their native language and native tongue. So, you definitely want to make sure you have some translation services in place. You can even have local HR professionals that can kind of be the boots on the ground, if you will, for communicating and disseminating information and translating that information and disseminating it to the local population. So language is definitely an important element and consideration to have when you're supporting a global workforce. The next consideration is culture, and this kind of relates to the language and communication piece. Different countries and geographic regions have their own cultures and customs. So you need to be very aware of those customs and preferred methods of communicating. It's also important to understand, certain religious holidays that some countries may have, or some countries have, sports holidays like, it might be the World Cup where some companies might decide to be off on a particular day or whenever the World Cup is occurring, or it might be a religious holiday, but regardless of what that particular thing is, I think is extremely important to understand that culture, factor that in when you're doing, organization-wide communications and changing policies. That's part of the strategic planning process, is to factor in the external environment and understand, some of the customs and uh, practices for the local culture and adjust accordingly. So culture is definitely something that should not be overlooked. The next consideration is the legal landscape for the country. So the world is as large as it is. Technology has made it much smaller, and there's so much changes that are occurring in the legal landscape. You have GDPR in Europe. Within the United States, you have changes with FLSA. So it's constantly changing, and there's so much factors that go into some of these changes. So as HR practitioners, you have to be very aware and keep yourself apprised of all of these different legal changes that are occurring, and making sure that your policies are updated so that you can comply with these different legal changes that may be occurring. So the legal landscape is something that it's very inherent within what we do in HR. It has a huge impact on operations and the way that we communicate with the workforce and the way that we uh, conduct our business and operations in HR. So it's extremely important to be vigilant of the legal landscape, and you can do that by subscribing to various newsletters. You can watch the news. You're gonna have to do a lot of reading, and there's a lot of other global law firms that publish blogs and podcasts where they opine on the impacts of these different legal uh, changes that are occurring. So the legal landscape is something that's extremely important, and you should definitely keep that on top of mind. And the last consideration I have is with respect to time zones. So within HR, we're constantly having, webinars and different meetings, and we have global partners and local partners, and we have different meetings that we need to have and conduct in order to plan accordingly. And when you're doing these types of meetings, you need to factor in the different time zones. When I was supporting a global organization not too long ago, it was very common for us to have several different sessions, with training. When we're rolling out new programs or new uh, technology, we would have to have multiple sessions. So we'll have one in the morning, we'll have some sessions in the afternoon, and then we'll have some in the evening. Primarily because when we did the ones in the evening, our partners in the Asia Pacific area, it was the morning in their time. So you definitely have to be very mindful on the different time zones that your global partners are living in, so that when you're setting up meetings and trainings and different types of events, you can ensure that you're you you have a time that works for the different segments of that population. So those are the five considerations I have for global HR professionals. I hope that you found that to be very helpful. And if I missed anything, I'm curious to hear what some considerations you have. So please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until the next time, just remember, keep learning and stay tuned.